In the late 19th century, the Venmani family produced a series of poets whose work redefined the Malayalam language, setting a standard that eclipsed almost every other literary household in Kerala. Yet, at the exact moment the family reached this peak of artistic influence, their main lineage came to an abrupt and permanent end. History records no war, no plague, and no medical explanation for why the men of the house suddenly stopped producing heirs. Local folklore, however, points to a specific day when the family received a devastating curse and a miraculous blessing from the same supernatural entity. Following the specific details of this legend reveals a sequence of events that mirrors the actual historical disappearance of the Venmani name. The events began generations earlier at the Vadakkunnatha Temple in Thrissur. On one of the temple's inner walls, an artist had painted a portrait of a Yakshi, a local spirit. The drawing was so lifelike that a real supernatural entity reportedly took up residence within the image, bringing it to life. This Yakshi sought out men who invited her, visiting them at night and leaving them physically drained or dead by the following morning. At the time, a young Venmani boy was staying at the temple for his studies. He was known for being slow-witted and naive, making him a prime target for the other students. A group of his peers cornered him in front of the painting, and they tricked him into reciting an explicit invitation for the Yakshi to visit his room that night. What began as a cruel prank set in motion a chain of events that would eventually result in the total erasure of the boy's bloodline. When the Yakshi arrived that night, she found the boy's innocence unexpected. Rather than taking his life, she chose to spare him, and the two began an unlikely relationship. She agreed to return to him every night, provided he followed one rule: he must never touch another woman without her permission. This arrangement held until the boy was summoned home by his father, a man bound by strict orthodoxy who forced his son into a marriage with a woman from their own community. Caught between his father and the spirit, the boy reached a compromise with the Yakshi. He began a double life, alternating his nights between his mortal wife and his supernatural lover. Eventually, the mortal wife gave birth to a human son, seemingly securing the family's future. But the boy was now trapped between the rigid expectations of his society and the uncompromising laws of the spirit world, a conflict that could only hold for so long before the two forces collided. Years later, the family gathered for the human son's Upanayanam, or sacred thread ceremony. It was a massive public event, crowded with relatives and priests adhering to strict tradition. The Yakshi saw the ceremony as her right to claim. As the boy's first wife, she insisted on being the one to offer him his ceremonial first alms. As the ritual began, she moved through the dense crowd in the guise of an ordinary mortal woman, approaching the center of the ceremony. Her presence was immediate and suspicious. The mortal wife looked at the stranger and realized this woman was not a member of their family or their village. The wife's suspicion turned to rage. She accused the intruder of trying to defile the ceremony and called on the other women of the household to intervene. The confrontation turned physical. The women of the house assaulted the disguised Yakshi and forcibly threw her out of the gates and onto the street. By publicly insulting the spirit, the household had shattered the long-standing pact, ensuring the Yakshi would retaliate against the entire lineage. Standing outside the gates, the humiliated spirit shed her human disguise, revealing her true form to the terrified onlookers. She made it clear that while she did not blame the man she loved, she would pass judgment on the household that had rejected her. She declared that after 3 generations, no male child would live to see his sacred ceremony, bringing the family to an end. But as a final gesture, those doomed generations would be granted a poetic genius no other family could match. Unable to return to her own realm after years of human contact, the Yakshi summoned a supernatural fire. She allowed herself to be consumed by the flames, her essence rising into the sky and vanishing forever. Today, the original Venmani family bloodline is completely gone. The brilliance of those final poets remains the only trace of the family, the beautiful burning ash left behind by the fire that consumed them.